They say grief brings people together. But sometimes, it doesn't. Sometimes it tears open things that were already falling apart. Sometimes it doesn't heal anything, it just peels back the layers you've been hiding under for years. And when that happens, you're not left with peace. You're left with pieces. It's been almost a year since my husband passed. He died suddenly, no long goodbye, no hospital beeps, no final words. Just a cold, quiet phone call at 2:13 a.m. I still remember the exact time because I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just sat there, holding the phone against my ear, listening to the silence that followed those words. I'm so sorry for your loss. My husband, Mark, he wasn't perfect. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't warm either. He was just there, reliable in the way old clocks are, always ticking, never really noticed unless they stop. We had love, once. The kind of love that sneaks up on you when you're young and full of hope. But somewhere between the job promotions, the late dinners, the unspoken arguments, that love dried up. And I learned to live on less. After he passed, people assumed I'd break. They expected tears, collapse. But you know what I felt? Guilt. Because I didn't feel what they thought I should feel. I didn't feel shattered. I felt hollow. And the scariest part? That emptiness, it didn't start the day he died. It started long before. And then there was him. Ethan, my stepson. Mark's boy from a previous marriage. He was 19, tall, quiet, thoughtful. We were never close. He called me ma'am for the first 2 years of our marriage. Always polite. Always distant. But something changed after Mark was gone. Maybe it was the silence in the house. Maybe it was the way he looked at me, not with judgment, not with pity, but with something I couldn't name. Something I hadn't felt in years. It started small. A glance held too long. A hand brushing mine at the sink. A late-night conversation that felt too warm. I told myself it was just grief, his and mine, trying to find something solid to hold on to. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. I didn't know where this road was heading. But I couldn't stop walking down it. Not because I wanted to cross a line, but because for the first time in a long, long time, someone saw me. And when you've been invisible for years, being seen can feel like salvation. Subscribe to Heartfelt Tales Unfold, where real stories cut through the silence. You won't believe what happened next. I'm in my early 40s. I used to be a lot of things, a woman with plans, with warmth, with energy. Now, most days, I feel like a whisper of who I used to be. Not gone. Just quiet. Grief does that. It doesn't knock down the walls of your life all at once. It slowly unhooks everything that held you together until you wake up and don't recognize the person staring back at you. Mark was my husband for 9 years. Reliable. Hardworking. He kept the lights on, kept the fridge full. But he also kept his heart locked away. I used to think it was just how men are. That silent, steady type. But sometimes, silence can be cruel in its own way. He wasn't unkind. He just wasn't there. Not in the way I needed. He gave me a house, but not a home. He gave me his name, but not his presence. And then, one day, he was gone. A heart attack. Quick. Final. The kind of ending that doesn't give you a chance to say, I wish you'd looked at me more. I wish you'd seen me. Ethan, his son from his first marriage, moved in after the funeral. 19. Tall, quiet, the kind of kid who doesn't speak unless he has something to say. We were never close. He called me ma'am for the longest time, even after I married his dad. Always polite. Always guarded. We had our roles, and we played them well. But something changed when it was just the two of us left in that house. The air was different. He wasn't just Mark's son anymore. He was there. I'd walk into a room and feel his eyes on me. Not in a threatening way, never that. Just present, aware. Like he saw me. Really saw me. The house felt heavier after Mark was gone. Every hallway echoed. Every room whispered things I didn't want to hear. I'd walk past the bedroom we shared and feel like a stranger in my own life. The kitchen still smelled like his coffee. His jacket still hung by the door. It was like living with ghosts. And then there was Ethan. Quiet, careful Ethan. Trying to be strong. Trying to help without asking for anything. I remember once, I dropped a plate, it shattered on the kitchen floor. And before I could even move, he was there, cleaning it up. He didn't say a word. Just looked up at me with these eyes. So calm, so gentle. And in that moment, I didn't see a boy. I saw someone else who was hurting. Just like me. We were both trying to survive the same storm. But slowly, quietly, we started looking for shelter in each other. Not because we planned it. Not because it made sense. But because grief leaves holes in places you didn't even know were whole. And sometimes, the person who fills it is the one standing right beside you. And that's where it all began. It was a Thursday. Late evening. The kind of quiet that feels heavier than usual. I had just come out of the kitchen when I noticed the light on in Mark's study. That room had been closed off since the funeral. Nobody went in there. Not even me. It still smelled like his cologne, that mix of cedar and something faintly sweet. His book still sat open on the desk, as if he'd be back any minute to finish a chapter. His reading glasses rested on a folded newspaper from the day before he died. I pushed the door open slowly. And there he was. Ethan. Sitting in his father's old leather chair, slouched forward, elbows on knees, holding a photo in his hands. His face. He looked so young and so tired all at once. The kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. I stepped in gently. Didn't want to startle him. He didn't turn around. Just said softly, I don't remember the last thing I said to him. His voice cracked, and in that moment, I didn't see a teenager. I saw a boy who'd lost the only anchor he had left. I walked over, placed my hand on his shoulder. He didn't shrug it off. He turned slightly, just enough for me to see his eyes, red, watery, tired. He held out the photo. It was of the three of us. Taken the summer before last, at that lake house Mark insisted on renting even though none of us really wanted to go. I was wearing a wide-brimmed sun hat. Mark had his arm around me. And Ethan. He wasn't smiling. Just standing there like he never quite fit. He stared at that photo like it was a question that didn't have an answer. I knelt beside him. Took the picture from his hands, gently. And before I could say a word, he leaned into me. It was subtle. Almost cautious. But his body just folded toward mine. And I wrapped my arms around him, not as a stepmother, not as anything defined, just as someone who understood what pain looked like in the dark. It should have been a moment of comfort. Simple. Safe. But it lasted too long. His arms around me tightened just slightly, and I didn't let go either. Not right away. I felt the way his head rested against my shoulder, the way his breathing slowed. And I closed my eyes, because something inside me shifted. It wasn't lust. It wasn't desire. It was something deeper and far more dangerous. A quiet spark. A warmth I hadn't felt in years. The kind of warmth that makes you realize just how cold you've been living. And in that moment, I knew. Something had passed between us. Unspoken, uninvited, and completely real. It should have ended there. It should have been just comfort. But I felt something stir, and that terrified me. After that night in the study, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Not the hug itself. Not the photo. But the way my arms felt when they wrapped around him. The warmth. The pause before we let go. And that's when the guilt crept in. Not loud. Not dramatic. But slow, like water seeping under a closed door. I started remembering Mark. Not just the man I buried, but the man I married. The way he used to call me sunshine in the first year, and then stop somewhere along the way. The way he sat at the dinner table with his phone in his hand and his eyes anywhere but on me. The nights he rolled over without so much as a good night. There were good things too. Of course there were. But those moments had started feeling like old photos, things I could look at, but not touch. Things I remembered more clearly than I actually felt. I told myself I was just lonely, that I was grieving, that Ethan was like a son, that it was normal to feel a little off after everything we'd been through. But then he started showing up, more, in little ways. He'd text me while he was out, "Do you need anything from the store?" He fixed the leaky tap in the kitchen, brought in the groceries without being asked, reorganized the attic just because I mentioned it was a mess. And then one evening, as we were putting away the dishes, he looked at me and said, "Dad always said you were stronger than you knew." And something in me shifted, not because of what he said, but because of how he said it, like he meant it, like he saw that strength and still wanted to be near me. My heart fluttered, and I hated myself for that. I went to bed that night and lay there staring at the ceiling, ashamed of how warm that compliment had made me feel. I pulled Mark's old t-shirt close to me, the one I hadn't washed since the funeral, but the scent was gone, and all I could smell was distance. I told myself it was a phase, that Ethan didn't mean anything by it, that I was just looking for meaning where there was none. But then he started calling me by name. Not ma'am, not hey. He started saying Karen. Softly, carefully, like it mattered. And every time he did, I felt seen. Was it just grief playing tricks on me? Was I mistaking kindness for connection? Or had I been invisible for so long? I craved being seen even if it was by him. I began to catch myself watching him when he wasn't looking. The way he moved around the kitchen. The way he rubbed the back of his neck when he was thinking. How he always paused before knocking on my bedroom door. Every time I noticed something, I scolded myself. I reminded myself who I was. Who he was. But then he started sitting a little closer when we watched TV. And when I laughed at something, he'd turn to look at me, not the screen. I wanted to shut it all down. Draw a hard line. But I didn't. And deep down, I knew why. Because the truth was, no one had looked at me like that in a very long time. Not even Mark. Especially not Mark. And I was afraid of what that meant. Afraid of what that said about me. Afraid that maybe, somewhere in the cracks of my brokenness, I wanted to be looked at that way. And I didn't know how to forgive myself for that. It was raining hard that night. The kind of rain that makes the windows tremble and the whole house feel smaller. The wind howled like it was mourning something too. And then, the power went out. I was in the living room with a blanket over my lap, half asleep on the couch, when everything went dark. No TV. No hum of the fridge. Just silence, and the storm. Ethan came down the stairs with a flashlight, his voice calm, steady. "I'll grab the candles." He moved through the house like he belonged there. Like he had always been a part of it. And maybe, in his own way, he had. We lit candles in the living room and sat together in the flickering light. The storm outside made conversation feel pointless, so we just sat. The space between us on the couch wasn't much. And slowly, it disappeared. Not all at once. Just inch by inch. Until I could feel the heat of his arm brushing mine. Then our hands touched. Not fully. Just the edge of his pinky against mine. I pulled away, but not fast. And I didn't tell him to move. Didn't say a word. We sat like that for a long time. And I told myself the silence was harmless. But my heart, it was pounding loud enough to drown out the thunder. The next day, in the kitchen, I caught him staring at me. I had just come back from a walk. Hair damp, cheeks flushed from the wind. I was pouring tea when I felt it, his eyes on me. I looked up. He didn't look away. And for the first time, he didn't look like a boy. He looked like a man. A man who saw me and didn't flinch. Didn't turn away. I felt a flush rise up my neck. Turned back to the kettle like it meant nothing. But I couldn't shake the way his gaze had settled on me, not curious, not accidental, intentional. That night, I had a nightmare. The kind that grabs you by the throat and doesn't let go. I woke up gasping, heart racing, drenched in sweat. I don't even remember crying out, but he must have heard me, because within seconds, my door opened. And Ethan rushed in. No hesitation. Just urgency. He sat on the edge of my bed and asked, "Are you okay? Did something happen?" I couldn't speak. I just shook my head, eyes filled with tears, body trembling. He reached for me, arms wrapping around my shoulders gently, like I'd break if he held me any tighter. I should have stopped him. Should have said, "I'm fine, go back to bed." But instead, I let him hold me. I rested my head against his chest, closed my eyes, listened to the rhythm of his breathing. Then I heard him whisper, so soft, like it wasn't meant to be heard, "You're not alone." And I didn't pull away. I wanted to believe him, more than I wanted anything. Because for the first time since Mark died, maybe even before that, I didn't feel like I was floating through life, unseen. I felt tethered, grounded, held. That night blurred a line I never thought would move. And once it did, it wouldn't stop shifting. It was late, almost midnight. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that only comes when every room has settled into its own kind of grief. I was in the living room again, staring at nothing. A candle flickered on the coffee table. Ethan came in without saying a word. He had a blanket in his arms. He just sat beside me. For a while, neither of us spoke. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was thick, heavy, full of everything we weren't saying. I leaned my head back against the couch, eyes closed. And then, I felt it. A touch. Soft. His hand brushing a piece of hair from my face. My eyes opened slowly. He was watching me, not bold, not pushy, just waiting. Watching like he didn't know if this was the moment everything would break or fall into place. And then, without a word, he leaned in. Pressed a gentle kiss to my forehead. It was small, tender. But my heart, it stopped. Because I felt something in that kiss. Something too real to ignore. He started to pull away. But I didn't move. Not right away. And in that hesitation, the space between us dissolved. I turned my head only slightly, and his lips were right there. Close. Too close. And then, we kissed. No fireworks. No music. Just breath. And warmth. And a moment that felt like falling through water. Weightless. Suspended. Unreal. My hand moved to his chest. His fingers brushed my neck. And then we stopped. Just like that. Both of us pulling back at the same time. Like we'd been burned. Like we'd touched something sacred and broken the rules. He looked at me, eyes wide, chest rising and falling like he couldn't catch his breath. And he said, barely above a whisper, "I'm sorry." I didn't mean, I cut him off. Not with anger. Not with shame. Just a quiet truth, I know. I didn't either. We sat there, frozen. Not knowing what to say. Not knowing what we had just done. But knowing deep in our bones that it happened. That we crossed a line. A quiet, dangerous line. And nothing would be the same after that. It felt like being seen and exposed. All at once. And in that exposure, I didn't feel loved. I didn't feel free. I felt naked. And not just in body. In soul. The days that followed felt longer than the ones after the funeral. We didn't speak about what happened. Not once. But the silence, it was louder than any confession could have been. He stopped sitting near me. Stopped lingering in doorways. Stopped looking me in the eye. Every moment we crossed paths felt like we were walking on broken glass. Careful. Bleeding. But pretending we didn't notice. He started staying out late. Told me he was crashing at a friend's place some nights. Said he was helping a classmate with a project. I didn't ask questions. I didn't have the right to. The nights he was home, he'd keep to himself. Headphones in. Door closed. Lights off before mine. And I walked around the house like a stranger in my own skin. Like the walls knew. Like the carpet under my feet judged me with every step. I couldn't eat. Food tasted like cardboard. My stomach curled into knots every time I heard his footsteps upstairs. Not because of him, but because of me. I hated what I'd done, what I let happen, what I wanted to happen. I tried to return to my church group. Sat in the back, quiet. Listened to women talk about faith, forgiveness, moving forward. I smiled when they looked my way, but I never spoke. Not about this. I started seeing a grief counselor. Told her I was lost, that I felt stuck. She asked if I was angry at Mark for dying. I shook my head, but the truth was, I was angry he left me hollow, and more angry that someone else filled that space. I cleaned out the closets one afternoon, found one of Mark's old sweaters, and held it for so long my fingers went numb. And then I started packing up things I never thought I'd touch. Not because I was ready to move on, but because I couldn't breathe in that house anymore. I started thinking about selling it, about leaving, about starting over somewhere no one knew me, where I wasn't the woman who kissed her stepson in the dark. Then one morning, over coffee neither of us touched, Ethan looked up and said, "Maybe it's time I moved out." I stared at him, heart caught in my throat. Everything inside me screamed no, but all I could do was nod. He didn't wait for a fight, didn't ask for a reason to stay. He just stood, walked away, and I listened to his footsteps fade down the hall. I didn't want him to go, but I knew he needed to. I just didn't know if it was to heal or to escape. Grief is a strange thing. People talk about it like it's this one solid weight you carry. But it's not. It's a shifting thing. Some days it sits in your chest like a stone. Other days it flows through your veins like ice. But the worst part is how alone it makes you feel, even in a room full of people who care. After Ethan left, the house felt quieter than ever. Not just empty, hollow. Like everything inside it had crumbled, except me, and I wasn't sure I wanted to be what was left standing. I spent a lot of time sitting on the edge of the bed, hands in my lap, trying to make sense of what I had become. I asked myself over and over, did I ruin him? Did I take a boy already grieving and turn him into something he didn't choose to be? Did I stain every memory he had of his father? Because how do you come back from that? How do you look at a photo and not see the line that was crossed behind the frame? But in the quiet moments, when the guilt loosened its grip just enough to let me breathe, I had to admit something else. In those moments, those few, trembling, terrifying moments with Ethan, I felt alive. Not proud, not strong, but alive, like blood was moving in my body again. Like I had stepped out of the gray and back into something that felt like color. And that's the part one hates the most. Not that it happened, but that I wanted it. That I wanted to be touched, to be seen, to be needed, even if it was by someone I never should have reached for. I haven't forgiven myself. I don't think I deserve to. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I am trying to understand the part of me that broke. The part that begged for connection so badly, it reached for the first hand that reached back. Maybe that's what grief does. Maybe it doesn't just empty you. Maybe it distorts you. Blurs the line between love and need. Between comfort and desire. Between what you know is right and what your heart begs for in the dark. What is love, if not wanting to be understood? And what is shame, if not love twisted the wrong way? Have you ever made a choice that didn't feel wrong until it was over? One of those moments where the world goes quiet and you realize you stepped over something, but you can't see the line behind you anymore? Was it emotional cheating? Or was it just two people, drowning in silence, reaching for the same piece of driftwood, trying not to go under? I keep replaying that night. The look in his eyes. The way we both pulled back too late. Not out of guilt, but out of fear of what it meant, of what it revealed. About him, about me. And I wonder, was I wrong for letting it happen? Or was I just human? Have you ever been in a moment like that? Where the line between comfort and connection blurred beyond recognition? Was I cruel? Or just lonely? If they make you think, or feel, or question, then like this video, subscribe, and turn on the bell for heartfelt tales unfold. Because here, we don't just tell stories. We unravel the human heart. Grief is a quiet house where even whispers echo. Sometimes, it's not the absence that hurts the most. It's what you discover in the silence that follows. I'll never forget the way Ethan looked at me that night. Not with desire. Not even with confusion. But with understanding. A kind of shared ache that neither of us had words for. Not because it was right. Not because it was love. But because, for one moment, just one, it felt like the world had cracked open and let us be something other than lost. That's what haunts me the most. Not the act. Not the memory. But the feeling that it was the only time in a long, long while I didn't feel invisible. And some stories were never meant to see the light.